Project Apocrypha, The Death Knight, a LitRPG by J.M. Foley, a.k.a. Arty. Chapter 3, Home Sweet Home. By the time we finished stabling Clover and unloading the last of the crates, the sun had nearly disappeared beyond the treetops, leaving streaks of deep orange and dusky violet across the sky. The first chill of evening was setting in. A pair of torches flanked the front door of Fred's cottage, their soft golden flames casting long shadows over the porch and bathing the weathered wood in warmth. "Home sweet home," Fred said, grabbing the front door and pushing it open with his shoulder. "Go on in, lad." The moment I stepped through the doorway, I was hit with a wave of heat and the rich smell of herbs and firewood. The cottage interior was simple but comfortable. Rough stone walls, hanging bundles of dried lavender and thyme, a fireplace already crackling in the hearth, and the thick woolen rug sprawled across the wood-planked floor. Cozy didn't even begin to describe it. Then, "Oh my," came a voice from the far end of the room. "Honey, I did not realize he was your type. Tall, messy, vaguely lost? Tragic. I suppose you could do worse to cheat on me with." A man stepped into view from the kitchen doorway, wiping his hands on a towel. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to the elbows, revealing lean, freckled arms dusted with flour. He was slender, graceful, with flowing auburn hair pulled loosely behind his ears. Fred let out a long sigh, already smiling. "Cass, for God's sake!" Cass grinned. "What? I'm only saying what everyone's thinking." He crossed the room in a few elegant steps and offered me a hand. "Cassian, but I go by Cass. Husband to that gruff mule over there." "Arty," I said, taking his hand. Nice to meet you." "Oh, he has manners. You bring home a keeper, Freddy." Fred groaned and dropped his coat on a peg by the door. "He ain't mine. Found him on the roadside eating dirt." Cass blinked. "Romantic." "Long story," I muttered. "Clearly." Before I could explain further, there was the sound of feet on stairs. Light ones. "Papa, welcome Oh. A girl, maybe 18 or 19, skidded to a halt on the last step. She wore a faded blue tunic with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows, a little smudge of ink on one cheek. Her hair was a long, silvery black curtain that caught the torchlight like moonlight on water. In one hand she held a wooden spoon. In the other, a book tucked awkwardly under her arm. Her skin was deep violet, like wine in shadow, dusted with faint specks of starlight near her cheeks and shoulders. Her eyes, a piercing crimson, glowed faintly in the firelight. Every movement was smooth and careful, like someone used to being stared at or judged. She looked like a final boss in a video game, and also, quite possibly, the most breathtaking woman I'd ever seen. Gods above, was she some kind of dark elf princess? A sorceress? A demon, maybe? She froze the moment she saw me, eyes wide. Then in a practiced motion, she ducked behind Cass, half hiding behind his shoulder. I didn't know we had a guest," she said quietly. Cass reached behind his back and gave her a reassuring pat. "It's all right, love. Come say hello." Fred gestured toward me. "Ella, this here's Artemis. Arty, this is our daughter Alaris." I raised a hand in an awkward wave. "Hi." She gave a barely audible hi in return, then ducked her head, cheeks slightly pink. Cass looked between us with a smirk. "Well now, this is interesting." Fred narrowed his eyes. "Don't start." We ate by candlelight, seated around a well-worn table that creaked with every elbow resting against it. The hearth crackled with low, steady warmth that made the whole place feel safe, lived in. Fred stabbed a thick chunk of potato with his spoon. "Now eat up, lad. Ella's stew may look like pond water, but it'll stick to your ribs." "Papa!" Ella gasped, scandalized. Cass, grinning as he poured more wine into his glass, added, "He means that as a compliment, sweetie. You know dwarves like their food thick enough to pave roads with." "Exactly," Fred mumbled through a mouthful. I smiled awkwardly. "No complaints here. Honestly, this is the best thing I've eaten in however long it's been." And I wasn't lying. The stew was rich with earthy root vegetables, peppery greens, and something faintly herbal and numbing in the back of my throat. Comforting. Real. I hadn't even realized how hungry I was until that first bite. Cass leaned his chin against his palm. So, Arty, now that you've signed your soul away to the mighty Fred X Empire, what's your class? I paused, mid-spoonful. I don't really have one? Cass's eyes lit with mischief. Oh, that rare vagabond subclass then. Fred turned to him, brows raised. You pulling his leg or are you serious, lad? I sighed, setting my spoon down. It's complicated. I woke up in a forest with no memory. The first thing I saw was this weird blue text floating in front of me. A menu, stats, class options. I thought I was hallucinating. I didn't even know if it was real. I glanced around the table, bracing for judgment, but there was none. Just a round of quiet blinking. Cass raised an eyebrow. You mean you didn't realize everyone had a stat screen? I hesitated. So that wasn't just in my head. Fred gave me a sideways look. You talking about the system? The what now? Cass leaned in, curious. The system, the thing that shows you your stats, quests, abilities. Everyone's got it. It's just how things work. Ella nodded quietly. Like gravity, or seasons. It's always been there. So that's normal. Everyone has one. Ella nodded again, her gaze flickering toward me. Of course, it's the first thing they teach you in school. Don't they have classes where you're from? I rubbed the back of my neck. Not that I remember. Fred raised an eyebrow. No school, no class, no stats. Yet somehow you've got decent posture, a good head on your shoulders, and enough spine to hope in a stranger's carriage. You're either lucky, touched by the gods, or a damned fool, he grinned. Maybe all three. I gave a weak laugh and sank a little lower in my seat. What were your stats like when you saw them? Cass asked, tilting his head. Honestly, I shrugged. I didn't pay that much attention. I was too freaked out. Strength was average, intelligence was a little high, wisdom was weirdly low. Fred pointed his spoon at me. Join the club. You'll want to look again, Cass said, more gently this time. Especially if you're planning on making a living around here. Even goat wrangling takes a minimum dexterity check. Ella glanced up from her bowl, something flickering in her eyes. If you'd like, I could help you recheck your sheet after dinner. I know a few diagnostic chants. That caught me off guard. That'd be, yeah, thank you. She flushed and quickly looked back down at her stew. Fred gave her a sideways glance. Just don't go throwing diagnostic magic around the barn. Last time she cast indoors, she summoned a frog in my boot. Cass chuckled. That frog was adorable. We finished the rest of dinner in relative peace. Warm food, flickering hearth, and a strange little family that had somehow taken me in. After dinner, Ella cleared her throat softly and stood, brushing her hands against her tunic. If you're still up for it, I can take a look at your stats now. Yeah, I said, rising to follow. Lead the way. She gave a little nod and padded quietly down the hall. I followed her up a creaky wooden staircase and into a narrow room at the end. It smelled faintly of parchment and river water. Her room was exactly what I should have expected. Neat but cluttered. Shelves of thick books lined the walls, most of them handwritten and bound in leather or twine. A dozen jars filled with powdered herbs, chalk, dried leaves, and stranger things lined the desk beside a low-sitting bed covered in dark blue quilts. The air felt heavier in here, quiet, still, like stepping into a cave or a church. She moved with careful purpose, lighting a trio of candles in a loose triangle on the rug and clearing a small space in the middle. Most schools of magic have some way of analyzing a person's soul, she said as she worked. Arcanists use crystal arrays. Divinists chant and bathe everything in holy light. Elementalists, well, they're flashy about it. She gave me a faint smile. I'm a witch. Or rather, I will be once I register my combat schools. My focus is on occult and elemental magic, specifically dark and water. What I'm doing is technically a dark ritual, but don't worry, it's not as scary as it sounds. Right, I said, eyeing the candles. Just a friendly neighborhood soul-examining hex. She let out a soft laugh and shook her head. It's not a hex, it's more like inviting the truth to the surface. Sometimes the system only shows what you're ready to see. This helps fill in the blanks. Sounds useful. It is. She looked up at me, then quickly away. Could you grab my grimoire? It should be in the top drawer. I stepped over to the dresser. Left or right? She was already bent over adjusting the candles, focused on the ritual. I don't think she heard me. I opened the right drawer. Inside was not a book. There was a long, cylindrical object resting atop a bundle of silk, vaguely wand-shaped, made of polished wood, smooth and finely carved. Runes etched across the handle glimmered faintly. I picked it up. So, you guys use magic wands here? What does this one do? I asked, turning it over in my hand. It buzzed. I yelped and dropped it. Ella's head snapped up. Her entire face went crimson. Oh, no. She darted over, snatched it up with both hands, and slammed the drawer shut with a loud thunk, leaning back against it like she was guarding the gates of hell. For a second, we both stood frozen. Her cheeks were bright pink, a sharp contrast against her violet skin. Sorry, I managed. The left drawer, she whispered, not meeting my eyes. Yeah, got that now. She pressed a hand over her face, somewhere between mortified and homicidal. I scratched the back of my neck, cheeks burning. No judgment. I mean, hey, everyone needs a wand now and then. She let out a strangled noise that might have been a groan. Can you please just forget this happened? No problem, I said, trying not to laugh. We stood in awkward silence for a beat too long. Then she cleared her throat and pointed at the left drawer. That one. I opened it very slowly, and this time, thankfully, it did contain a book. Thick, leather-bound, and a little scuffed around the corners. The grimoire practically hummed with power as I handed it over. She took it carefully, brushing one thumb against the embossed sigil on the cover, before setting it down beside the circle of candles. The mortification on her face had already begun to fade, replaced with something sharper. Focus. Ellen knelt on the rug and began to trace a sigil into the floor with the edge of a half-burnt chalk stick. Her movements were precise, almost meditative, fluid, as if she'd done it 100 times. She muttered softly under her breath, too low for me to understand, but every word seemed to settle in the air like falling snow. Gone was the flustered girl clutching a vibrating wand. This was something else entirely. She lit each candle with practiced flick of her fingers. No matches, no flint, just a breath of magic. Water pooled in a tiny clay bowl at the center of the circle, reflecting the soft candlelight like rippling starlight. Sit, she said, her voice a little steadier now, though her cheeks still held a trace of color. Cross-legged, hands in your lap. I obeyed, settling down opposite her inside the circle. The floor was still warm from the fire, though the air had gone oddly still. I'm going to start, she said. Are you ready? I swallowed. Does it hurt? Only if you fight it, she smiled, but it was faint, distant. Her red eyes glinted as she began to chant, low and rhythmic, her hands moving over the water. Her fingers didn't quite touch it, but the surface rippled anyway, shadows swirling within. The candlelight dimmed around us, or maybe the shadows were just growing thicker. I didn't know magic could feel this intimate. Ella's voice rose slightly. The runes around the circle lit one by one with a soft violet glow, and suddenly something shifted in the room. I felt like being seen from the inside out. Not just watched, but understood. She opened her eyes, and all at once my UI shimmered back into view, more detailed than ever. Lines of text, numbers, and traits I didn't remember seeing before. Whoa, I breathed. Ella gave a small, proud smile, Told you, sometimes it just needs a little help. My vision shimmered. For a moment, I wasn't looking at Ella or the circle of candles. I was looking through something. A lens. A veil. The familiar soft blue glow of the system filled the air like a HUD in a game, except it wasn't overlaid. It was the air. Transparent windows floated in front of me, displaying my stats in crisp, glowing font. Name, Artemis Braun. Level, 1. Race, human. Sex, male. Class, unassigned. Primary school, unassigned. Secondary school, unassigned. Attributes, strength, 14. Dexterity, 11. Intelligence, 16. Piety, 2. Vitality, 13. Wisdom, 6. Endurance, 15. Charisma, 10. Luck, 25. Skills, none. Ella hummed softly, eyes flickering across the glowing glyphs suspended in the air. You've got muscle, she murmured, brows drawn in focus. Not brute tier, but solid enough to swing something big without it swinging you. Her gaze shifted. Dexterity's average, better than a farmer, worse than a thief. You could hit a gobber, probably, if it stood still. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Sharp mind. You'd do well with spell work if you let yourself trust it. Piety's low, she said, careful and diplomatic. A moment passed. Vitality's solid. You can take a few hits before you go down. She winced at the next reading. Wisdom, not so much. You might survive a fight, but not if it involves reading the room. Ella gave a quiet laugh, the kind you give when something fits a little too well. Then, softer. Endurance is strong. You're built for long days, long roads. She lingered there, just a second longer than she needed to. Charisma is... She trailed off, her cheeks coloring faintly. Nothing to write songs about, but you're not exactly unpleasant either. Her eyes flicked up to mine, half a second of contact, and just as quickly back down. She cleared her throat and kept going. Then she stopped, blinking, staring. Luck, she said slowly, is 25. She turned to look at me, wide-eyed. That's good, I offered, uncertain. I've never seen luck that high, she said. Not on a student, not on a master, not even in the old epic scrolls. She stepped a little closer to the floating display, reading it again like it might change. When you level up, you can't even spend points in luck or charisma. They just are. They change with you. Like, if you smile more, dress nice, stay clean, your charisma might go up, but luck? She shook her head. Luck's the wild one. She ran a finger across one of the glyphs, slowly. Some people say the system hands out luck as a joke, or a curse. Others think it means you've got a role to play, whether you want one or not. I swallowed. So, what does that mean for me? She didn't answer at first. Her gaze stayed fixed on the light. Then slowly, she looked up. If I were the kind of girl who believed in fate, a soft glance, more serious than shy, I'd say you're either going to change the world or burn it down. Silence fell, heavy, but not uncomfortable. Just the hush that comes after a truth too big for the room. The candles flickered. The glyphs hovered above the circle, casting soft blue light across her face. She didn't speak again right away, just reached out and traced another arc through the air. The glyphs turned, rotated, and reshaped into a new pane. Perks and talents. There's more, she murmured. Everyone's born with a few innate gifts. The system calls them perks. She glanced at me, then turned back to the light. The first one's called Iron Will. You are stubborn, unyielding, and harder to break than you look. Mental resistances increased. Effects scale with endurance. She gave a small nod. That checks out. You've got more backbone than you let on. The second glyph pulsed softly. Spell Striker. Your strikes carry echoes of magic. Slight damage bonus when using melee attacks in tandem with spells. Chance to stagger on arcane impact. Her brow rose a little. Interesting. Hybrid type. That's not common. Then she tilted her head. Have you cast anything yet? I shook my head. I haven't tried. You should, she said gently. Might surprise you. Her eyes drifted to the final glyph. Her brows drew tight. Anchored soul, she read aloud. But unlike the others, it didn't have a description. Just anchored soul, question mark, question mark, question mark. She leaned in closer, squinting. It's active, not hidden, but there's no record in the source. No one's ever locked it before. I frowned. The source? Oh, right. She glanced over at me. It's sort of a magical archive. Casters use it to register and cross-reference spells, talents, perks, anything that's been studied or documented. This ritual pulls up your sheet and then checks the source for matches. So, like magical Wikipedia? I asked. Wiki what? She echoed, puzzled. I shook my head. Never mind. So my talent doesn't match anything? She shook her head. It's not dormant like an unawakened perk. It's fully bound to you, permanent, but blank. Like you're the first person to ever have it. The glyph pulsed softly. Not hostile, just unknowable. Is that normal? I asked. No, she said quietly. Not even close. She stared at it a second longer, like it might blink first. Then she lifted her hand, and the glyphs began to fade. One by one, the candles dimmed, the light receded, the magic dispersed. Ella looked down at her hands. Whatever it is, it's yours, and the system, or the source, doesn't want you to know why. Not yet. Well, that's comforting. She glanced at the right-hand drawer and gave a tiny, knowing smile. I mean, could have been worse. I narrowed my eyes. Worse than a mystery soul perk with no name or function? Her smile widened, just a little. You could have checked the wrong drawer again. I groaned and dragged my hands down my face. You said we were not talking about that. No, she said quickly, face flushing all over again. No, we're not. But she was smiling, really smiling. Thank you for listening. If you want to read ahead, you can find the link to my book on Royal Road in the video description. If you're enjoying the story, please feel free to leave a comment and tell me your thoughts. If you like my way of storytelling, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be writing and uploading more chapters and stories soon. Thank you so much for listening.